There is a video on the internet that has been watched hundreds of millions of times. It is grainy, it is short, it is 2 minutes and 18 seconds long, and if you've seen it, really watched it, not just skimmed it, you know exactly why it never leaves you. The footage was captured by a security camera inside an elevator at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. January 31st, 2013. A young woman enters the elevator. She presses buttons, many buttons. She steps out into the hallway, looks left, looks right, then retreats back inside. She hides in the corner. She peers around the doorframe at something the camera cannot see. Her hands begin to move in ways that are difficult to describe. Strange, deliberate, almost like a ritual. Then she walks away down the hallway. The elevator doors, which had been frozen open this entire time, finally close. She was never seen alive again. Her name was Elisa Lam. She was 21 years old. She was a student from Vancouver, Canada. She had a blog. She had plans. She had a whole life waiting for her when she got home. But she never got home. And what investigators found 3 weeks later would raise questions that, even now, over a decade later, nobody has fully answered. Before we go further, I need to tell you something about the Cecil Hotel. Because the building itself is part of this story. The Cecil has existed in downtown Los Angeles since 1927. It is 14 stories tall. It sits at the edge of Skid Row, one of the most densely populated homeless communities in the United States. Over the decades, the hotel became known not for its architecture or its history, but for what happened inside it. Two of the most infamous serial killers in American history stayed at the Cecil while they were actively operating. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived there in the 1980s. Austrian killer Jack Unterweger chose it specifically because of that association. The hotel had also seen numerous suicides, overdoses, and unexplained deaths across its decades of operation. Locals called it the Death Hotel. This is where Elisa Lam chose to stay, alone on a solo trip through California. She had been documenting her journey. She kept an active Tumblr account. Her posts were thoughtful, creative, full of photographs and observations. She wrote about books, about her feelings, about the beauty she found in ordinary moments. People who followed her described someone bright, introspective, and deeply alive. She had a history with mental illness, bipolar disorder, for which she was medicated. But she was managing it, she was traveling, she was doing something brave. She checked into the Cecil on January 26, 2013. 5 days later, she vanished. The morning of February 1st, Elisa didn't come down for breakfast. She didn't answer her door. Her family back in Vancouver hadn't heard from her. They reported her missing on February 6th. LAPD opened an investigation. They searched the hotel, they reviewed security footage, they interviewed staff and guests, and then, 3 weeks after she disappeared, they made a decision. They released the elevator footage to the public. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The video spread across every platform that existed at the time: forums, blogs, YouTube, Reddit. People watched it on loop, frame by frame, slowing it down, zooming in. The comment sections filled with theories within hours. Some said she was playing a game. Some said she was hiding from someone in the hallway, someone the camera couldn't capture because of its angle. Some said her movements looked dissociative, consistent with a severe mental health episode. Some said the elevator's behavior, the doors refusing to close, the car refusing to move, suggested she had activated the hold function, possibly without realizing it. And some said something else entirely, something the internet, at its darkest, is always ready to say. They said the footage didn't make sense for any of those reasons. That's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part came 18 days later, on February 19th. Guests at the Cecil Hotel had been filing complaints about the water. The pressure was low, the color was off. Some guests described a taste they couldn't place. Nobody connected it to anything immediately. Hotels have plumbing problems. It happens. On February 19th, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof to check the building's water tanks. There were 4 large tanks up there, sealed, feeding directly into the hotel's water supply. He opened the first one, then the second. On the third tank, the hatch was ajar. Inside, investigators found Elisa Lam. She had been in that tank for 19 days. I'm not going to describe what was found in clinical detail, because this isn't about shock. What I will tell you is that the discovery explained the water complaints immediately, and that the guests who had been drinking and showering in that water for nearly 3 weeks had no idea. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning. Bipolar disorder was cited as a contributing factor to her behavior. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Not to anyone who looked closely at the logistics. Here is the problem. The rooftop of the Cecil Hotel was not accessible to guests. To reach it, you needed a key, or you needed to bypass an alarm on the rooftop access door. Hotel staff confirmed that the alarm had not been triggered on the night Elisa disappeared. The door showed no signs of forced entry. The tanks themselves were large, roughly 8 feet tall. They had hatches at the top. To get inside, you would need to climb up the exterior of the tank. There was no ladder directly attached. The hatch was heavy. LAPD's conclusion was that Elisa had somehow navigated all of this alone, in the dark, without triggering any alarms, and then closed the hatch from the inside. No surveillance footage captured her going to the roof. The cameras covering the stairwell showed gaps. Investigators reviewed everything they had and stood by their findings, but then the internet found something else. Elisa's Tumblr was still active, even after her body was found, even after her death was confirmed. Posts continued to appear, content she had apparently scheduled in advance through the platform's queue system. Thoughtful posts, photographs she had taken, things she had written. For thousands of people who had followed her disappearance online, watching her blog continue to update was deeply unsettling in a way that's hard to articulate. It felt like receiving messages from somewhere unreachable. It felt like she was still there, still speaking, from the other side of something. True crime communities went deep into her archive. They read everything she had written. They traced connections between her posts and details of the case. Some found patterns that weren't there. Some found things that gave them pause. One post in particular circulated widely, a quote she had reblogged that seemed, in retrospect, to carry weight it couldn't have intended. The internet does this. It turns grief into investigation. It turns tragedy into content. It turns a real person into a puzzle, and in doing so, sometimes loses sight of the fact that the puzzle was a person. Elisa Lam was a daughter. She was a student. She was someone who found joy in small things and documented that joy carefully. She was 21 years old and she was alone in a city she was visiting for the first time. And something happened to her that nobody has fully explained. The official story says it was an accident, a tragic outcome of a mental health crisis in a dangerous place at the wrong time. Maybe that's true, but here is what I keep coming back to. The elevator footage shows her looking into the hallway, looking at something, retreating, looking again. We will never know what she saw. The roof access has never been fully explained, not in a way that accounts for every detail of the physical challenge it would have presented. The camera gaps in the stairwell footage were never publicly addressed. And the hotel, the Cecil, the Death Hotel, was renamed shortly after the case drew global attention. It's called the Stay on Main now, as if a new name could close the distance between what happened there and what we're willing to accept. The coroner signed the paperwork. The investigators closed the file, but the elevator footage is still out there. People are still watching it, still pausing at the moment where her hands move in that strange, deliberate way, still asking what she was doing, still asking what or who she was responding to. Elisa Lam's case was officially resolved. It has never felt resolved, and I think you know exactly what I mean.